Hey everyone, I'm Charlie Moses. I'm the founder of Sick Futures Collective and the host of this podcast, The Future is Sick. This is our very first episode. I am so excited. Also, it is Halloween Day today, which I think is the best day to record our first episode because it is, in my opinion, the best holiday. I'm so pumped. Um, I am going trick-or-treating tonight. I am dressing up as an astronaut. Why not? I don't know. I'm wearing my motorcycle helmet as the astronaut helmet. Is that what you call it? Do you call it an astronaut helmet? I do not know. Anyway, I couldn't think of a better guest to kick this whole thing off. Um, Today, I am joined by my friend Sal Marx. They are absolutely amazing. They are a trans disability advocate. They are a multimedia artist. They are a narrative medicine professional. And their experience with disability and in disability justice all started when they were a teenager. Gosh, they've led things like patient-centered programs in healthcare settings, and now they are also joining the Sick Futures Collective Board of Directors, which is amazing. I am so honored and so excited. We're hoping to build something like a storytelling archive amongst many other things, but that is one project I am so excited about. So anyway, Sal lives in Brooklyn with their cat Sisyphus. Um, Kindred cat person. And I am just so excited to talk with them today about all things about disability, about illness, about art making, care, thinking up different futures and ways of navigating care, say in medical systems, within our communities, and just the day in and day out of everything. All right. So without further ado, let's get to it. Sal Marx, hello, welcome. How are you? Here we go.
I actually have a specific memory from my childhood when I was first getting diagnosed, where I had like all these sports posters on my wall and I like ripped them all down. I like made it completely white and then I just like rebuilt it with art and things. But it's a interesting thing to create a space that feels like home.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, was it because of the diagnosis you were like, no sports, cannot do, will not do? Or what shifted, you think?
I think that my dreams of being in the WNBA felt taken away from me, and I had to kind of renegotiate with what was possible for me in the future. And that didn't look like being a professional athlete. And obviously that's okay, but it was a little bit devastating to grapple with.
Yeah, especially at 13, because yeah, that's like sports dreams when you're like a preteen or a teen, or they're big. It's like
Exactly.
big time. Dang. Well, okay, well, let's get going. Would you introduce yourself, name, pronouns, where you're from, anything else you want to start it off with?
Yeah, absolutely. I am Sal Marx. My pronouns are they, them. Um, I'm a white queer trans person from an island outside of Seattle.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So you're now in New York. You were in New York, you moved, you came back.
Yeah, I've been all over the country. I went to college outside of LA, Pomona, and then I moved to New York right after I had graduated. Lived here for almost 5 years, and then after finishing my master's degree, I had just had a big surgery, and I needed to pay off some debt. So I moved back home with my parents outside of Seattle before making my way down to LA for a short stint, and then made it back to New York, which is where a lot of my family is from, and it has always been a second home to me. So
Oh,
I'm happy to
cool.
be back. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Yeah, on the coasts. How did LA feel? How was that stint? Or I guess, I mean, being at Pomona, sort of kind of LA, a little bit.
It was interesting. I mean, LA is a different kind of isolation than a lot of places I lived in, just because you're driving alone everywhere, and um, that felt hard to me, and I didn't love it, but I do have lots of good friends that are there, and a little community that I miss, and I still travel back for work, so it's good to get some sun. But it didn't feel like a sustainable place for me to live long term.
Yeah, I hear that. But New York does. New York feels like a good spot for you.
New York does, which is interesting because I know it's not the most disabled friendly place in terms of accessibility and subway stations, and everything. But yeah, it absolutely does feel like home and where I want to be.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, how is it navigating transportation there, just like day to day living as a disabled person?
Yeah, well, I mean, I pass for able-bodied in more ways than one. I don't use any assistive devices, so um, that is a huge privilege, and just being able to get where I need to go. I think it's a lot easier for me than for many folks. But it's still hard having an invisible disability. It doesn't, not that there's one way to look disabled, but I definitely sometimes struggle when I need a seat. I have to sit down, but people don't know that, and so they don't necessarily give up their seat or give you the grace of um, offering things like that in public.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's the one of the trickiest parts about being younger and disabled, but with an invisible disability is that it's like, I don't know. I know for me, sometimes I'm like, the days that I do need a mobility device, it's like feels easier in some ways because at least like people can tell.
Yeah, there's something visible.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, put together a series of questions, and we can go through them, or we can just go down some tangents, or whatever feels most comfortable. But I'd love to know just kind of generally your experience with illness and disability. I know you said you were diagnosed at 13, which is young, but like not so young that you know you've been living this way forever, but like, just that I feel like 13 is a hard age to get any kind of big life altering news.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I'll start at 13. 13 was the onset of my pain. It took me, over 4 years actually to get a diagnosis, a proper diagnosis. I had a number of diagnoses along the way that were, first and foremost wrong, but also very much rooted in the fact that I was a young, um, assigned female at birth person who was facing all this stigma about, it's just in her head. It's not real. Like there's so many things that were told to me at a young age that were very much gaslighting my experience and making me feel like I was the problem. So it took a number of years to just get a proper diagnosis, which eventually turned out to be AS, ankylosing spondylitis, which is a chronic inflammatory condition. It's a type of arthritis. There's actually over 100 different types of arthritis, um, but there are not proper attention to many of them. And so there's a huge delay of diagnosis for a number of them. And that was definitely my experience. So AS was my first chronic diagnosis. I was diagnosed on 11/11/11, so I was 16 years old. But yeah, it's hard to not feel like there's some fate along with the diagnosis that comes on a day that's so, um, I guess, unique.
Yeah.
Um, so since I was 16, I guess it's been a number of other chronic symptoms that have happened throughout my life. It's been you know, 15, 20 years of this now. So it's never just one illness or one experience. It's a whole body system that manifests in new ways, and there's quiet periods of disease, and then there's flares. And so I've had to kind of um, learn how to live with those for all this time. Um, yeah, that's a bit about it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I had no idea there are 100 or over 100 types of arthritis. That's Wild, of course. Of course. Um, yeah, I mean, a little bit about, I guess, flares, because I know that so many of us get them, and that it's just kind of these like super intense periods where you're like, how do I live? What do I do? And I feel like for me, whenever I get a flare, it's almost like I'm like being reintroduced to my disease again, where I'm like, oh yeah, oh shit. It's the worst. Here I am. What is this body? What do I do? I'm so upset. But what is kind of your relationship to the flare? How do you deal with it? What do you do? Any tips or tricks for your own body yourself? And then also with that, like your relationship to this idea of healing that's so pervasive in our culture that you need to be healed or whatever that means to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you might have to repeat some of the questions, but
That's okay.
um, let's see where to begin. Well, I think I learned at a young age that there are always people telling you to get over your pain, to outthink your pain, to kind of there's like this restitution narrative. You have to get over it and get on with it, and that there's like a neat ending. When in fact, all chronic illness kind of inherently defies that. There is no cure, and the cure like rhetoric of our society makes it such that if you're living with a long-term condition, it will never go away. And that's a hard thing, but it's also like a fact of life. We all have bodies that go through phases that um, do weird things. And so I guess when I'm in a flare, I definitely agree that it makes me reminded, like, oh yeah, I forgot that I can be disabled and then I have to cancel my plans and you know, um, don't have capacity to do what I want to do on that particular day. And so um, I think being in a flare requires both like a dissociation where you kind of go out of your body and you go into other worlds just to like survive. And then on the other hand, it requires a kind of presence. Like pain requires you to be attentive to it. Like even if you ignore it, it's still gonna be there. And so for me, like having a flare is like this combination of like being out of my body and being like deeply present in my body. And so that's a big part of why I've turned to art and like ways of communicating and processing that maybe I'm not trying to like accurately depict something when I'm in a flare. Maybe I'm just like scribbling on a piece of paper in the dark because it helps me move through it. Um, but yeah, in terms of like there is no cure, and I think that's a hard pill for people to swallow. But in the end, it's okay.
Yeah, yeah. I found that like, I don't know, I feel like for those of us getting diagnoses or getting like continuous diagnoses, I feel like a lot of us are just in like the comorbidity club where
Yeah.
it's like, ah, every year you get like something a little new. But to explain to others that there is no cure has been that I feel like that's where I get a lot of pushback or roadblock because we want to believe so deeply that you'll be okay and you'll be back to quote unquote normal or whatever you were experiencing before you got these diagnoses and then you'll just be like good to go and knowing that that's not at all the reality and trying to navigate those conversations which I feel like we shouldn't have to but we do. And then also that concept of healing, where people are like, you can heal yourself through XYZ. Have you tried this? Have you tried that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a philosopher who has MS. Her name is Toombs, and she talks about illness as kind of these five core things. There's a loss of certainty, there's a loss of control, of freedom to act, of wholeness, and a loss of the familiar world. And I often think about that piece of losing the world that was once familiar to you and sort of what new world becomes available or doesn't. But, you know, there's there's also a piece of like we have to rethink all our relationships in the world, all the spaces and places that we move through. Um, and with every new comorbidity that comes, there's kind of this constant renegotiation with self and environment and all these factors.
Yeah. I wanna ask about your art and when you started incorporating that kind of into your process of perspective or like kind of world shifting when that came about. Have you always been connected to it or creative or kind of found that as a space for you?
I've always been visually inclined, I guess. But it was definitely like my grandma gave me a small pocket sketchbook, um, kind of coincidentally around the time that I was first going to doctor's appointments. And so it became something that was like just in my lap. You spend a lot of time waiting in waiting rooms as a patient, and there's not really anything to do. So it became like just something that I did for myself um to pass time, but also I guess to bear witness um to what I was going through. I have very vivid memories of just like sketching the fish tanks in the waiting rooms in Seattle Children's Hospital. But um since then, yeah, I mean it's been a huge part of just how I process living with different chronic illnesses, how I share and communicate with my communities. Um, and I think it has also taught me a lot about like access needs.
Mm.
So I don't always have the energy to say like work on a massive painting, which I do. But I have found that there is always something artistically that I can do, even if it's like the lowest energy day or a high pain day. You know, I could just be sitting at my desk scribbling, or I can like be doing lino cuts or folding earrings while I'm watching TV. Like I find that being physically engaged with art like helps me not be so overwhelmed with a pain experience or an illness experience. It really helps to get me out of my body, no matter what the like method of art making is. Um, and so I think it's a huge tool and something that everyone should incorporate in their lives, whether or not you consider yourself an artist, just as a way of dealing with illness and moving through it.
So cool. Yeah. I mean, I agree that it's like I feel like it's an innate thing for humans to want to create stuff, like make stuff, and to find your niche in that, like whatever it might be it like writing stories or poems or making visual art or taking photos or collage or just kind of, it's like getting into that space of flow state and being totally present. And for our bodies that are hurting constantly, it's just like a really nice low stakes way to engage in something and feel connected to something. Um, I know that you went to school for narrative medicine, and I wanted to talk about kind of the connection of that to your art, or if you've been incorporating art kind of through your educational path, how that looks. Um, I have so many questions about it, but we'll start there.
Okay.
Begin with that.
Um, yeah, so my undergraduate degree at Pomona was in public policy, psychology, and media studies. And so Um, I wrote my thesis about the ways in which rheumatoid arthritis got all this attention, all this money, all this support um, in public policy as compared to a disease like AS that had nothing. Nobody had heard of it, and that in turn trickled down to the extreme delay of diagnosis for people. And so there was a component of storytelling that I became really interested in because the ways in which we talk about diseases matter, right? AS was historically thought of as a man's disease, which is really to say that all the research that had been done on it was predominantly conducted on older white men. And so their understanding of who the illness affected um, was so far from reality. And by, um, you know, thinking differently about the ways in which we talk about illness and who diseases affect, um, it makes it helps all of us, but especially like getting diagnoses. That's a big part of it. So um, let's see, it's hard to tell this in a linear way, but so yeah, I had been making art since my thesis for a while. That was like putting my body scans up on the wall alongside written text about my illness experience. And so there was always this component of my art practice that had been about communicating illness experience. And so I had learned about the narrative medicine program. I knew that it was a varied mix of people that it attracted, from doctors to artists like myself, that is all about how the narrative, how telling stories is central to patient care,
Mm.
right? And if a doctor isn't able to adequately receive the stories that are told to them, there's a huge gap. And on the other side, if a patient isn't having their voice heard in the ways that they need, um, there will be a huge gaps in their care. And um, my perspective is that, like, if art and visual ways of talking about illness, like if art can carve a home for illness, then narrative medicine teaches us to step inside those homes, to listen closely, to ask questions, to be aware of what's missing, what's left out, what are the other things at play here, and ultimately to take great care in the stories that we're telling and that we're receiving.
Dang. Yeah. I mean that it really is, and we know we know what it feels like to be sitting there telling your doctor what is going on or trying to, and then for there to be like crickets on the other end and to not be heard and to know you're not being heard and then to get kind of a like blanket treatment plan or diagnosis or like I don't know what to tell you, versus being in a room with a doctor who's like, tell me your story, tell me what's going on. Like, I want to hear what you're experiencing. They're taking vigorous notes. It's just a fully different world and experience. And I imagine I mean, with like focusing on narrative medicine specifically, were there any kind of, I want to say like best practices for doctors or anyone working in healthcare?
I mean, it's there's not like a short list. It is a like um a way of showing attention and looking closely and listening differently. So it's more like humanities-based skills, I'd say.
Mm.
Um, but for example, I'm just thinking what you were saying, like in a patient setting, like medical records. There's never a chance for a patient to read what a doctor wrote about their story and basically say, here's what you got wrong, right? Um, I'm thinking about one of the visual projects I collaborated on in grad school, with a friend, Jen, that we have in common, who
Yeah.
had been facing medical racism and gaslighting for almost 15 years. She was trying to get an epilepsy diagnosis. And she later learned that there were words written in her chart that were getting passed on to other doctors that were basically repeating this idea that she was just worried and that there wasn't an actual real problem. And it's
Ugh.
like when this gets repeated and passed down and
Mhm.
funneled through medical records, it's like this is structural racism. And if the patient had had a chance, maybe just to, I don't know, collaborate, like look at the notes that were taken about their story, there would have been an opportunity much earlier in her illness diagnosis process, um, to get it right.
understanding her struggle with the medical system and that it's just so common. And especially for like AFAB folks, for assigned female at birth folks, it's like we're just always anxious. Like that's like I feel like that's the default for any doctor is just like, oh, they're just worried. They're making it up. It's in their head. It's not a big deal. Um, and like living with that and being gaslit and then embodying that or kind of internalizing that because you're like, oh, this is especially when you're younger, you're or truly at any age, you're like, right, like these are the people who know things. Who am I? If they're telling me that this is what it is, I guess maybe that's it. And then getting to a point where you're like, wait, no, I have to like fully advocate for myself in these spaces.
The greatest injustices in our healthcare system is this one that's like the epistemic injustice, the inability for people to have um, their voice as knowing heard, right? And so there's many opportunities to get it wrong, but if we think differently, if we think creatively, if we talk about um, increasing patient collaboration from, I think, the onset of any encounter, like we'll all be better for it.
Getting diagnosed at 13, who were the advocates in your life, or who did you kind of see pop up as advocates, or were you like, I'm just taking this on by myself here?
Primarily my mom. I mean,
Yeah.
um, so in the end, I had this wrong diagnosis from Seattle Children's Hospital, reflex neurovascular dystrophy, which is now outdated. I think it's kind of like CRPS, complex regional pain syndrome.
Mhm.
Um, and the only reason I was able to get a diagnosis is because my mom's adult rheumatologist saw me as a favor. My mom was like, can my kid just come to with me to an appointment and like, will you take a look at their MRI?" And that doctor, Dr. Gorman, is still my rheumatologist, like
Wow.
16 years later. And so if I hadn't had my mom, A, literally demanding a specific MRI that Children's Hospital refused to do,
Mhm.
um, there would have been no diagnosis. But
Mm.
so my mom, that doctor, I still do a great physical therapist at home. Um, so there've been a number of people that I guess have been consistent advocates in my life, but ultimately, put that need to advocate for myself on my plate at a young age. So
It's like there are plenty of scenarios where somebody doesn't have an advocate. They're going through the medical system. They're, just like shat on in a multitude of ways, depending on what they look like, where they come from, what their financial situation is, like all of it. And just trying to like white knuckle through these systems is, I mean, it's just absolutely, it's horrid, and we all know it. I think like, part of the Sick Futures project really is like thinking about what we want the futures to look like regarding care, regarding healing, accessibility, all these things. And I wanted to know if you have an idea or like kind of a systems approach to what that future might look like.
I think one of the hardest things when I talk about living with chronic conditions like on an ongoing basis with people is that I'm often faced with the response that like they're sorry. Like and I would propose that instead there's like a curiosity about living with illness and like it's okay to talk about it. Like it's it's not something that people should be sorry um, for, even though yes, pain and illness are extremely debilitating experiences, and I don't want to belittle that. But in terms of what it would look like, I mean, I think my process of working with patients and doctors in like the co-creation way, the project that we did also kind of goes back to um, these core questions in my work that are all about like number one, how can we collaborate across access needs? If we had questions like that built into every encounter, I think that would be a future where all people could be a part of it. Number two, how do we address power differentials that are inherent in and outside of clinical spaces? Um, Thinking about how we build spaces for narratives, for illness testimony that are not only verbal or written, that are creative, that are given opportunities to exist on Crip time, that don't need answers right away, that are moving slowly and carefully and with care. So I think a future that is um, led by sick and disabled people is a first step, but B, thinking a lot how um, we create worlds, literally speaking, that are um, accommodating all sorts of physical and mental conditions and opportunities to have voices heard that are outside of, traditional modes of language.
Yeah, I mean, it really is, it's the stuff we know that's like those who are being the most affected are the ones who have the most experience within these spaces, and to be able to put us in leadership positions around what care looks like, what the medical structures look like is crucial. And it's kind of, it's like, how do we, how do we get in there? How do we infiltrate that? And organizing and like really truly mobilizing within regions, in our communities. Um, I, I want to ask, like, for you with that, like with where we're at right now. Also, I just like had a thought about prefigurative politics where we're like living the futures we want, like in the present. But what does your care look like at present? Through like community, through your art, your creativity, through spirituality, kind of anything else you got on the docket.
Yeah. Well, you reminded me, I recently learned this term, crip dueling, that was coined by Stacey Park Milburn.
Okay.
And it's like the process by which disabled people mentor other disabled people in learning new disability skills.
Oh,
And
so cool.
and right, I know. So it's like
Yeah.
there's this whole education about being disabled that has um, been passed down to me by close communities of disabled people, and that's such a gift, whether it's learning how to give yourself an injection or commiserating about colonoscopy prep or needing to advocate for yourself with health insurance things. Like there's very
Mhm.
tangible practices that disability communities have taught me that I work to pass on. So I think in my daily life now, care, it looks like a lot of things. But it's it's noticing and showing respect for all the ways in which we push ourselves past our spoons all the time. Um, I have this list above my desk that's basically excerpts from Care Work by Lee Lakshmi, Piepsina
Oh,
Samara Sinha that everybody should read. Like there should be books that are core education for everybody, I think, and Care Work is one of those books. But
agreed. Yeah.
um, yeah, so I mean, there's so many things that care looks like on a daily basis in terms of checking in with my communities, checking in with myself, trying to just like listen to my body. Like I think many people with chronic illness kind of relate to this like feeling like there's a dissociation that happens a lot of times because um having uncomfortable physical experiences kind of makes you develop survival strategies that look different to everybody. So um um but I mean, care is being with my cat. It's trying to trying to nourish myself, trying to um, you know, meet myself where I'm at. Like my body's in charge. My body is the clock. There's no there's no prescription. And I think one of the things that a lifetime of chronic illness has taught me is that like I'm never going to have a care plan completely figured out. There's a constant kind of figuring it out with my my people um and my doctors, but in terms of just like living and processing illness, it's a daily thing that I just have to kind of meet myself where I'm at.
Yeah, so relatable. I mean, it is. It's like a moment by moment experience of care. Being like, oh, a minute ago, all right, in this minute, severe pain, discomfort, nausea, like whatever's coming up. Yeah, I think like, those care communities are crucial. Um, and it's something that Sick Futures is doing, like actively just wanting a space for people to be able to like come and be themselves and be in an environment and around people who just get it, where we don't have to explain ourselves or situations, and where it does move at that crip time. It moves at, at the pace of care and caring. And that there's like a collective study guide that exists there for people to know, like, read care work. There's so much good stuff in it. Check out Sins Invalid. There's so much good stuff there. Um, but I want to know kind of how you've built your community, or with other people who are disabled or maybe are indirectly affected, but they've got family members who go through it. Kind of what your process has been to come to that community point.
I feel like I've been lucky enough that that community has kind of come to me over many years and in very serendipitous ways. I mean, my my first connection with somebody, I was like recently diagnosed. I had been doing this fundraiser for AS, and working with the Spondylitis Association, and I got a random Facebook message and like that I didn't even see for a whole year, and it just like was in my my message requests, and that person, Carice Hill, became a close friend of mine and a real mentor in the disability community. Um, in college, I met somebody that had recently had an AS diagnosis, and I was helping her learn how to do her injections for the first time. And it's like, I think people kind of act often as like, oh, you have chronic illness, you should talk to this person. That like it has been helpful to just kind of have these random connections and friendships that grow into my life by virtue of that we're both living with some shared experience. And I think what's powerful is that um, the the ways in which that we have sustained, like I've found ways to sustain those friendships and those um, sources of community, even though these people in my life are literally all over the world, and we don't always talk often. Like there can be years that go by that we don't talk, but when we do, whether that's just to check in or if there's something specific someone's going through, like I feel like it's easy to pick up easily with people that have an experience of disability. It's like we're comrades in this. We understand it, and there's a sense of care that's inherent to it. And so that's something I cherish, and um, I feel a great kinship with disabled people all over the world. And in no ways do I have like an end to this. Like I hope that it keeps growing and that we can keep finding ways to come together more, because often it does feel like there are these one-on-one connections, but where are the spaces that all the sick people are having opportunities to engage with each other, that do live across time zones and um, access needs. And so that's one of the awesome things about Sick Futures that I think I was most drawn to is that let's just build a space and try to get as many of us together as possible.
It's like sick and disabled people, if if we like had the torch on some of this stuff, like, oh, capitalism just couldn't exist. It wouldn't even be here. There's no way. But like, your experience with that kind of I don't know what to even call it, but if there's been pressure on you to be like, don't let anyone know, or not, like if from a young age you've been like, this is me and I'm showing up and deal with it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, even my parents, well-intentioned, had strong opinions about like putting on my resume, like the different kind of work that I was involved in that was outing myself as being um, disabled. And maybe it does limit your opportunities, but at least it means that the ones that you do get, at least um, like they know what they're getting. And I don't want to work in a space that doesn't support disability in all its fullness and visibility anyways. And so um, as hard as it is to bring things into the light, I think it attracts the right kind of people and mission-driven work.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree fully. It like baffles me that disability where it's like don't let anybody know this part of you because they will discriminate. They will actively discriminate or discriminate without realizing that they are. Um, which really, yeah, I think it just like baffles me that we're still in this position with disability because it's one of those things that like most everybody's going to experience in some way, shape, or form at some point in their lives, but we're all just supposed to pretend like it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Being in spaces where, especially like work environments or just really any setting where people are like, yeah, we don't care, like, come hang out. It's cool here. Um, like I guess in those spaces, what has accessibility looked like? Like what has like dialogue around illness or disability looked like? Like could you do in your mind like a compare and contrast to environments that aren't cool with it and then environments that are?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like most work environments, by nature of being businesses, are on a timeline and a fast pace and, don't really honor the slow pace and
Mm,
the ways in which like you don't really know in terms of disability, like when things are going to come up out of the blue, right? Um, so the spaces that I tried to create in my work that do have this understanding are um, it's like this access needs piece is built in, like specifically talking to the person that you're working with. What are your access needs? What does today look like for you? Being open to having their access needs change over the course of a project. Like it's never a one size fits all at the beginning.
mm,
Um, the the piece about time, moving at Crip time, allowing things to take whatever time they will need. Um, And then again about like language and opportunities to allow people to speak in the ways that are most in line with who they are. Um, I think so much of like the clinical encounter that's like kind of based in extraction, like let me get all this information from you and put it into your chart and not really allow, like even just patient questionnaires, like the very frameworks that people are given have such a bias on what information is then pulled out of them. And
mhm,
it's like you could go see a doctor and fill out a pain scale and walk away from an appointment feeling like nothing you said had anything to do with your actual daily experience of pain,
mm,
right? So how can we rethink um, like the frameworks and the methods for engaging that are that are breaking down that box.
Mhm. Yeah. Gosh, I mean, it has me thinking like very expansively about how these things could look different. And, it's like communicating to healthcare systems or really any of these structures or systems or workplaces or, whatever it might be, just how to not paint with such broad brushstrokes when it comes to connecting or trying to get information or feedback. Um, and that it would just be, I don't know, such a such a clear, more honest world. And I want to know, like, how being disabled has shaped the way that you think about yourself, or think about the world, or really approach, everything you're up against every day.
I think that um, well, being being sick and disabled has taught me that um, I mean so many things. I can read you a list, but um, let's see. First and foremost, that we um, that we need each other. Like there's such a hyper focus on individualism in this country that I think before you have to rely on people, you maybe can go through it not realizing that um, you need you need a community of people in all sorts of ways, help supporting you in um, whatever way they can. Um, each person is full of a diverse set of bodily experiences that um, like it has taught me that everyone has a relationship with their body, right? Whether or not you're sick and disabled and whether or not you're paying attention to it, everybody has at some point, sooner or later, um, an experience with illness. And the sooner that people can kind of get on board with the fact that our collective liberation is all tied together, no matter where you are on the scale of sickness and disability, um, only by moving together and creating opportunities for people of all sorts of abilities um, to lead and to build worlds will we find a way out. Um, I mean, being disabled has taught me that it's okay to stay in, to be in bed, to build worlds where um, I once felt confined. I think, care work talks about this a lot, like the Crip emotional intelligence, that while there are so many disabling and debilitating parts of illness, there are also um, huge gifts of imagination and creativity that by nature of just having to adapt in a world not built for us, we are able to access. Um, and that's like such a powerful thing. I would never go back to being unsick just because I can't imagine um, like how closed off your world is have um, if you don't have like a confrontation with having to recreate it.
Mm. Yeah. That's so cool. Yeah, it really is. It opens it or like cracks it right open when you're like, oh, I take issue with this. I take issue with the way that things are, and yeah, the way I've been placed in it. And then it reframes and, allows you to look at the world, your experience, kind of the experience of everybody else in a completely different way. I mean, I think often about how um folks who aren't going through illness or disability. Um, yeah, it's like you don't really think about what it would be like if the world, if you were sick or disabled, like if you're not dealing with that, it's like not on your radar. You don't really have to consider it. Um, versus our experiences of being like, oh, every moment, here we are, let's do this. But it does, it like, I don't know. For me, it definitely made me like softer or something where I'm like, everybody, all the friends I could ever get, like, I'm just like open to it all. And the connection points feel like that much more solid and I don't know, just like vulnerable and open than they ever were before. Um,
Yeah, it connects us. Like I feel like it's such a gift to like I have so many multi or like different people that are different ages than me and like we have a
yeah,
connection even if you're 80 years old or
right.
5 years old having an experience of illness that
Yeah.
um it's like you're immediately friends.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. It's like you get on the same page real quick when you find out someone's going through it. Like one of my great aunts has lupus also. And so she and I are just like, I get you. I see you. And I know how bizarre it is to live with this mystery disease. Um, and yeah, she's in her 90s. Um, yeah, I do love the aspects of that. I think um understanding it's like, it's the reality of being like, yeah, this sucks. Like, and accepting that and knowing that and being like, it's a shit show every day. It's what are we doing? And also being like, yeah, and there are the parts of it that like make it worth it, very worth it to like be here and do our work and connect and live our lives and that like our lives aren't something to take pity on or to like feel sorry about. Um, that we're out here living and enjoying our time and, dealing with the stuff that comes our way. It's like we every living thing is gonna deal with the stuff. And it's a different flavor depending
Yeah,
on
it helps to have a sense of humor about it a bit. I mean,
yeah.
part of the like my process of drawing is like gathering information about just my daily life. Like it's silly to do a drawing of a of the carton that they give you when you're doing colonoscopy prep. Like that's just a silly thing, but it helps me have some, I guess, distance to it and look at it in a light way. But I mean, I have a grandpa who's sick and in so much pain, and I see him like unable to get past this like loss that he's experienced. And so I don't want to belittle the fact that it's a really hard thing for people to grapple with if you've lived an entire life as an able-bodied person and all of a sudden your entire world has changed. And so I don't know the answer when somebody is really struggling to accept that you know, their body and minds are able to do things differently or not able to do things at all,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. No kidding. Yeah, I think like talking about the loss aspect a bit or like the grieving around it, the grieving of that like extreme shift. I think it's cool that when you were a teenager, you were able to be like, hey, let's like blank canvas my room for a second, like my world for a second, and figure out what I need to bring in to like have it feel good again. But can you kind of remember back to that like grieving place when you were a teenager and like what that felt like or what helped you with it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say I think the grieving is an ongoing thing. Like there's an inherent part of living with illness that there will be things that you grieve, whether that's the loss of something um, that I used to be able to do, or the ways in which even in the present moment, I feel like I don't have access to spaces because I'm immunocompressed and um, not every space is friendly for people that have immunocompromised systems. So like the facing grief is an ongoing thing that I think you kind of have to just make space for and hold it in your hands and look at it, and that's a big part of my art practice um is also a grief practice, honoring that inner child that was so afraid and so um just devastated that the way that I imagined my life to be
Mm,
was not how it turned out.
mm,
Um, and so I think it would be awesome if we created space for grief more in our culture and communities. Like there's such a pressure to be like the optimistic patient, like, very I don't know, uplifted all the time. Like there's going to be a happy ending. I mean, it's back to this cure rhetoric that like
mm,
even if there's no cure, let's put all our hope that maybe someday there will be,
mm,
instead of saying, okay, what if there is no cure? What is the grief that's going to come along with that? How do we hold space for it, and how do we recognize that as real of a lived experience as pain or something like that?
yeah. Yeah, it really is like a what would the world look like if we were allowed to be in be in grief spaces and to understand and accept that things might not all like work out in quotes, um, the way that normative society wants it to. And that we just get to fully embrace ourselves and our bodies as they are while that continuous grief happens and giving space for it. Just like, letting ourselves be sad when we need to be sad, letting ourselves veg out when we need to veg out. I just call my zone like couch land. I'm like, I'm in couch land today. We are on the couch. We are sitting on the floor, leaning on the couch. We are not leaving the couch. This is just where we gonna be. Do you have any like in your home, any places where you're like, this is my this is my good, safe, cozy place?
I think I've my entire home, my small apartment in Brooklyn, is definitely a curated safe space for me because like I spend so much time here,
Yeah.
and it has to be a space that physically and mentally, I feel at home in. What you were saying earlier was making me think about like what if we were able to like describe grief or describe pain in ways like it was its own character or
Mm,
color or shape. Like I think a lot about colors in terms of their ability to communicate something outside of words, like sometimes grief is blue, but sometimes it's yellow. And there was this comic I did a while ago where one of the first panels said, Step one, listen to your pain, let it take you on a walk.
mm,
Um, so just like, what would it look like to give a voice to these different feelings, experiences, um, bodily symptoms in maybe ways that I don't have like conscious access to, but if there's like an opportunity to just try to process it through a visual or, you know, nonsensical way, like there's extreme value in that too.
yeah, no kidding. And as you were talking about that, I was looking at the art behind you. And if y'all are listening and not watching, Sal has like amazing art behind them that I'm imagining you painted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, everything in this apartment. This
Oh,
is like a working studio too, so
oh, great. Yeah. And I'm like looking at the colors and I'm like, yeah, okay, there's, like from my view on the left, it's like very blue, a little yellow. And then there's this like shocking on the right, just like red, vibrant painting. And I guess to walk us through kind of your where you were at when you were painting these and the difference between them.
Oh yeah, I mean, every painting is a little bit of a different place in my physical experience, but I don't think there's like a the blue ones are the sad ones or the,
Yeah.
it's not like that, but I would say that yeah, that red one behind me is definitely a recent one that I was feeling inflamed and kind of my body was angry, and so I rarely paint with red, but sometimes you just have to like only paint with red.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it like looking at it, I'm like, that's a flare. Like that's what that feels like. Absolutely. Yeah. Are there kind of colors or mediums or styles that you're drawn to when expressing the pain or grief or like happiness or acceptance, all of these different things?
I love oil pastels because they basically turn out to be like finger paintings, like blending on a piece of paper or a canvas.
Mhm.
Feels very physical to me, and that like is helpful to move through. Um, I I don't know, it all depends. Like there's so many there's so many different mediums that have their own um stories. I'm like looking around. Um, but yeah, I mean, I take my art on the go and I take my art in bed. You have to
Mhm.
find ways um to meet yourself where you're at. And I think that the the greatest gift that art can offer us is that it can be anything, and it's like prioritizing process over product.
Mhm.
Um, like very much mirrors my relationship with my body and just like there's no goal here, but let's sit with it and give space for it to have its own language in whatever comes up. It's not like I have a plan for every painting that I do. In fact, many of them I kind of have to live with alongside for a long time. Like the canvas is a living thing in my apartment. Um, it's really frustrating to me. Like I'll send a painting to someone and they'll be like, "What does it mean?" I'm like, I'm not gonna, that's the painting is what it is and let it speak to you for
Mhm.
itself. I mean, I can tell you what it means to me, but I I strongly don't like having to like read a painting back because I don't think there's an answer,
Yeah.
Someone else's interpretation of my work is just as valid as my own.
Mhm.
And I think that's a beautiful thing too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it has me thinking about, I mean, with any medium, it's so much that where it's more about helping people feel less alone, those connection points, than it is about interpreting it in the way that the artist wants you to interpret it. Um, and I wanted to ask, before we close up here, because we are coming up on the hour, but are there ways that listeners or readers or those watching can best support you and your work or the projects that you do? Do you have your work kind of out in the open? Are you sharing it in certain spaces?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things on my website, online, on socials. You can find me. I'm Sal Marx 11. I'm hopeful that we will be building some more visual work on the Sick Futures website. I also sell prints. I don't have a very up-to-date website with that aspect right now, but if anyone wants to get a print from me, I can make prints of anything. Um, and I would love to collaborate with folks. So, I mean, maybe just putting a pitch out there. If you're someone that lives with a chronic illness and you want to have your story co-created in a visual way, I would love to hear from you. And, um, you know, we were talking a bit last week, I think it was, about like how do we build an archive
Mhm.
where we can see stories in one kind of centralized database. Of sick and disabled people in their own language that's made by patients, with patients, for patients. Um, and I mean, I say patients, but I really mean people. Like we're more than being patients. And so if you have a story and you want to have this be included, there's no shortage um, of people that have experiences that need and deserve to be told.
Yeah, this is awesome. And just to spell it out for people, Sal Marx, SalMarx, is that right?
Yep.
Cool. Great. And what's your website?
Um, my website is my name, salmarx.myportfolio.com. But if you Google me, I think it's one of the first things that comes up.
Oh, that's
So,
great. Wonderful. All right. Anything else we didn't cover that you want to talk about? I mean, there's so much. It's like I want to ask you more about your childhood experiences and then getting into young adulthood, all of these things, but maybe we will save it for another episode in the future. But thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you being our first The Future is Sick guest and taking the time and on this fine, fine holiday. What are you doing for Halloween? Do you have any plans?
oh no, I'm flying out to LA tomorrow. Have to decide if I'm dressing up, so we'll see.
Nice. Yeah, great. Okay. Well, I'll talk to you soon. Thank you
Yeah,
so
sounds
much.
good. Thank
Yeah.
you too.
All
Thanks for
right.
making it happen.
Yeah, for sure. All right. We'll see you later.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Bye. Dang. Okay. That was awesome. A huge thanks to Sal for being a part of this very first episode, for all their wisdom, just for being an incredible person overall. And their art is so wonderful and so necessary. My God, what a cool way to share our stories and our experiences and to just exemplify what we're feeling and totally agree that you know for all of us having some kind of creative practice is just such a great way to connect and to feel less alone and to share ourselves and our stories with each other. Yeah, Gosh, so if you want to learn more about Sal's art, about their narrative medicine practice, or the work they're doing with Sick Futures, you can find links in the show notes, links on our website, in our podcast webpage. But anyway, this podcast, it is an experiment in Crip time, in storytelling, in imagining futures together. So if you liked what you heard, please share it, follow the show, and stay tuned for more episodes, more conversations with more brilliant disabled creators, organizers, thinkers. Oh, yeah, I'm so excited. This is wonderful. So until next time, y'all take care, rest when you need to, and remember the future is sick. Bye. See you next time.